Apollo is actually a very powerful place to source your leads list for when you're doing prospecting. I love it because it's so affordable, it's accessible to anybody, but it does have its limitations. We actually use it in-house to generate leads for ourselves and for our clients. We are a B2B lead generation agency. We've been doing this for a couple of years. We have generated over $1 million in revenue for our clients with the emails that we have sent out, and it all starts with a leads list. Apollo is actually a really big part of the leads list that we create. So I wanted to share some of the best practices that we use when we're building leads lists specifically with Apollo so that you can make sure that you maximize the effectiveness of your leads list, because it can go wrong. All right, so the first thing is the couple of use cases that we have for Apollo. First, the best way that we have used Apollo ever is to find the company names of the companies that we want to reach out to elsewhere, and then we bring them into Apollo. The reason for this is that there are sources outside of Apollo that are going to be more accurate in the types of companies that you want to reach out to. So let's take, for example, Clutch. Clutch.co is a directory of a bunch of agencies. You might use it to find the types of marketing agencies that you want to reach out to. If you want to reach out to marketing agencies, that might be the best place to start. In our case, for this particular walkthrough, I'm going to be building a leads list for our services, which is B2B lead generation using cold outreach. And we're going to be reaching out to B2B SaaS companies in this particular case. The reason I wanted to give you a very specific use case for this, which is ours, is because I'm going to be applying some of the ways that we maximize the results that Apollo gives us for the right type of leads that are most likely going to become our clients. Okay, so with that being the case, the first use case that I was talking about of getting leads elsewhere, for us in this particular leads list, it would probably be getlatka.com, which is going to be the most comprehensive SaaS database of companies that are, SaaS companies. But to be more realistic, we're just going to go ahead and build the leads list directly from Apollo so that you can just see what that would look like, because it's a really entry level way of getting started with prospecting, and I don't want to overcomplicate it by adding all of these external tools. So these are going to be, some very basic filters on here. I have added a couple of them that we like to use pretty often, but otherwise these are going to be pretty self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to do the most basic thing that we could possibly do. We're only going to be including companies in the United States. That leaves us with 59 million potential contacts to reach out to. Let me remove this filter because I just wanted to show that originally you start with 218 million. So that reduces it to 60 million, which are all the contacts in the United States. For our particular offer, we know that we reach out to small and medium-sized companies, no matter what the industry is. And with small to medium-sized companies, for our offer, it makes sense to reach out to founders and CEOs. So we're going to add those as the job titles that we want to reach out to. So you can see how simple it is to, apply these filters in Apollo. That reduces our leads list to under 1 million. And now we're going to do the number of employees at the company. Let's do a custom range so that we can have a little bit more control. And just based off of our experience, we have had the most success working with companies and really solving their problems whenever it's really on the smaller end of the spectrum. So we want to exclude the companies that are maybe 1 or 2 if it's going to be for our full done for you services, because if you have 1 or 2 employees, you should be doing lead generation yourself. If you have more than that, then it might make sense to start outsourcing. So we're going to put a minimum of 5 total and a maximum, let's say 25 total. So this is usually the sweet spot of the size of companies who are outsourcing their lead generation because they can. So that reduces our leads list to about 250,000. And now, I said we would be reaching out to B2B SaaS companies. So let's go ahead and change the industry and keywords. Okay, so first tip here, for industries, we usually don't touch it. The only reason we would touch it is to exclude generally some industries that we know for a fact are going to be not the right type of company to reach out to. And the reason for this is, let's say that we are reaching out to SaaS companies. A SaaS company could categorize themselves on LinkedIn, which is where they're pulling this information from, as an information technology company. So that's kind of like the broad term of SaaS. Or they could maybe be a niche specific SaaS product. So for example, they might be a SaaS for property management solutions. So they might be in the real estate industry. So they might categorize themselves as part of the real estate industry, even if they are a SaaS company. So if we excluded real estate companies, then we would actually be excluding this particular real estate SaaS company. So that's why I don't really like to touch the industries filter, because it's a little too harsh. And it's also not, totally accurate, because this is all information that people have input themselves whenever they're building their company profile on LinkedIn. They may never look at it again, and they don't really mean anything by it. Instead, where we let Apollo do its magic is with the company keywords. Now, there are a couple of approaches to this, but the one that I really like, and the one I'm going to be doing in this video, is to give a very comprehensive list of company keywords. So I have an Apollo ChatGPT prompt that I use to build a list of keywords to include on here to make sure that we get what we're looking for. And you can kind of see that on here. Basically, what we're looking for is, 100 company level keywords to identify B2B SaaS companies. Basically, we want them to include some general B2B SaaS terms. We also want to get some niche specific SaaS companies, and we also just want to do some terms that are like B2B tools. What we're looking for here is comprehensiveness. What we definitely don't want to do is have some vague terms on here like technology or digital, because including the word digital, while it is going to be very obviously relevant to a SaaS company, it's obviously also going to be relevant to a lot of different kinds of companies that are not going to be technically B2B SaaS companies. So we want to make sure that this list of keywords is always accurate to the type of company that we want to be included on this list, but not to the point where it's including companies that we don't want to be reaching out to. All right, so these are the keywords that we are going to be plugging into the keywords filter here. Since it's a comma separated list, you can just copy and paste it. And that's why we asked it to be that way. And that gives us now only 67,000 contacts. Now, these are all contacts that are, founders and CEOs at these companies. I've been messing with these filters, so let me just replace that. Typically, whenever you're on Apollo, you're going to be given this list of companies and results sorted by relevance and in descending order. The reason that this is important is for a couple of reasons. The first reason I'm going to be touching on now by reversing the sorting to relevance and by ascending, because now it's going to be prioritizing the least relevant companies on this list. This is really good for QAing your list, because if you're just looking at the first 25 results, you're going to think, okay, perfect, all of these companies look great, but that's only because they are going to be the most relevant companies according to the criteria that you gave it, right? But now, whenever you look at the least relevant companies on this list, you start to see a couple of issues here. The first issue that we see is that the job titles are not necessarily founders and CEOs. Instead, we see, for example, we do see a founding software engineer, but if they're specifying that they're the founding software engineer, then they're also specifying that they are not the right founder to reach out to at this company in particular. We also can see on here executive assistant to the CEO. So obviously we don't want to reach out to them if we are intending to be reaching out to the CEO. So we can exclude job titles that include the words like assistant, and that's going to exclude all of the assistants from this list. We can also exclude the keyword like engineer. We can exclude technical, because a lot of these SaaS companies are going to have two co-founders, one technical, one, the one who is in charge of kind of like the brand, the face, the growth. And that's usually the person we want to reach out to for our offer in particular. So you can look through some of these results that are the least relevant results, and you can kind of make some more filters on the job title side of things. Chief Visionary Officer is actually the right person to reach out to. Some people just kind of give themselves these names, and it's really important to remember that Apollo is scraping from LinkedIn, so that's going to explain a lot of the inaccuracies on here. And since this isn't directly a LinkedIn source, then they are also going to be likely a little bit outdated, because they have a leads list database of 220 million or something like that total people on there. So some of these people are just going to be outdated. Like, they may have left the job, they may have left the company, they may have retired. So you have to keep that in mind when it comes to Apollo as well. So not only is sorting by the least relevant companies or leads going to give us the least relevant job titles, it's also going to give us the least relevant companies. So the one that we have on here that comes up first is Shanks and Associates. They may have been relevant for a specific keyword. Maybe we did like legal SaaS or something like that, but they are obviously not a B2B SaaS company. So we can add more filters on here. Like when we were doing some industry filters, we might say we don't want to reach out to law practice. Law practice is a pretty good indicator that they're not going to be a relevant company because it's not saying they're in the legal space. It's saying they're literally a law practice. So that excludes those types of companies. We can also exclude specific keywords that we might see. So Colin and Samir, that's a YouTube channel. Let's see, they're in the entertainment space. We don't want to exclude entertainment industry companies because there are obviously SaaS companies in the entertainment space, but we might exclude one or two keywords that we see on here that are never going to be relevant. So that might be what you do. But the really other importance of the relevance is that if you go back to the descending order, meaning you're going back to first seeing the most relevant companies, because we added such a comprehensive list of keywords, then we can be very certain that the first leads on here do meet the criteria that we're looking for. So if we only added, 5 or 6 keywords on here to make sure that all of the results are the most accurate ones, then we are going to be missing out on a lot of companies that would otherwise be relevant. And we are not necessarily training the Apollo algorithm to know exactly the type of lead that we want to reach out to. So these first leads are going to be, as you can see, a lot of CEOs and founders, because that's what we said we want, CEO or founder. So they're like, okay, well, we have a bunch of both. And also for the companies, when it comes to the keywords, these are going to be companies with a ton of keywords that match the keywords that are on here. It's not just 1 or 2 matches, it's going to be a lot. So because we have 63,000, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these companies match the keywords on here with like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 keywords. And those are obviously going to be the exact right type of companies that we want to reach out to. Now, for a campaign, let's say we're aiming for, 2 or 3,000 leads for one campaign. Maybe we're just testing this model. 63,000 is still too many. We can do a lot to reduce this leads list, but not for the sake of just reducing the leads list, for the sake of making sure that we are reaching out to the right type of company and the right type of founder. So some of the things that we can look at are headcount growth. This is one of my favorite filters because what headcount growth tells you is whether or not somebody has hired over the past 6, 12, or 14 months. So in this case, if we just put like a 5 at the minimum percentage, since these are all small companies, a 5% increase over the past 12 months means that they've hired at least one person. So from that original list of 63,000 companies, that reduced it to 23,000. So that removed about 60 something percent of the list. And that's really telling and important because what that means is that these are companies that likely haven't really been growing. So we just removed about 40,000 companies that aren't really growing, aren't really investing in their growth. The companies that are left are all companies that have at least had the budget to hire one person over the past 12 months. And that is very telling that they are also going to have the budget probably to outsource their lead generation. So that's going to be a very good signal for us. Now, number of employees by department. We can add any kind of department on here. In our case, since we are kind of in the sales development space, then it might be helpful to reach out to somebody, to a founder at a company where they don't have a dedicated sales member on staff. So if we have a maximum of 0 sales employees in a sales department, then that reduces the list further. So that's obviously very helpful. Other things that we can do, we can change the email status so that, we can do this verified leads only. I don't usually do this. And the reason that I don't do this is because the emails that you're going to get from Apollo are not going to be necessarily the most accurate and the most up-to-date emails that you're going to get. This is just because Apollo has such a massive database that they're not real-time crawling every single day. Everything changes. People change their email address. They might leave their job, etc. So we're going to use a real-time verifier after we get the right context for these companies. So that's kind of a 2-step process. And because of that, we don't really need to do this because what that's going to do is it's going to remove all of the contacts on this list where Apollo doesn't have a good email account for. And if they don't have an email account for those prospects, then we might be removing prospects that we otherwise could find on another source, and they might also be relevant people to reach out to. All right, so another thing that we can do is we can add something like a technology filter. This is especially important for, like if you want to gauge the interest that a company might have in investing in their growth. Specifically, if you're reaching out to, for example, local businesses, a lot of these businesses, they're kind of like happy with where they are. They're not really interested in growing. But if they have, like something like a mix panel added to their website, or maybe a hot jar, then these are going to be very, very strong indicators that they are companies that are actually investing in their growth. So that's something that you might include. Let me change this email status, remove that. That's something you might include if that's something that's important to you. We could also be like reaching out to Shopify stores, because if maybe you are reaching out to e-commerce, then obviously, you can make sure that they have certain e-commerce platforms on their website. And that's going to be pretty good indicator that these are e-commerce stores, in addition to some of the keywords that you added. But we don't really care about that for this particular use case. Actually, I think we can leave it here for where we are. We have 16,000 total prospects. For the sake of this example, what I'm doing is I'm going to be exporting 200 of these just so you can see what we do. And I am bringing that over to Clay. So I've actually already done this. And these are 200 leads that I brought in from Apollo. Now, when we exported from Apollo, we saw that, we weren't only exporting the ones where they had a verified email account, because we were going to verify that ourselves anyway. And also sometimes they just didn't even have an email address for the contact. Here's a contact, for example, where they didn't find an email address and we just got the no contact. What we did was we actually ran this HTTP API. This is for Million Verifier, which is a way to verify your email addresses in real time to make sure that the email account actually exists. What that gave us was the results of okay means that the email account does exist. If you send an email to that email account, it's not going to bounce, which is incredibly important, because a high bounce rate is a really, really strong indicator to like Gmail or Outlook that you're sending to a very low quality list, and they're going to start sending you to spam. So we don't want that. That's why we use something like Million Verifier. There are other tools out there like Never Bounce, Zero Bounce. They're all great. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but we're looking for these okay ones. Catch-all refers to, I don't want to get too technical, but to catch-all basically means that they weren't able to know for sure if this is a safe email account to reach out to. So you have to kind of check again if that's going to be a good one to reach out to. Obviously, we weren't able to run this for whenever we didn't find an email. So basically what doing this export from Apollo left us with was, of the original 200 that we exported, let's say the results is equal to okay. Of the original ones, Apollo gave us 133 valid email addresses that we can reach out to. Now, this is a rather small leads list. Let's say that we did this 10 times bigger. If we were missing, what is this, like 35% of the list, then, we're missing out on 35% of the people that we would want to reach out to. Now, remember, this was a pretty filtered list, where we only reached out to, companies of the right headcount size. They're only in the US. They're only founders and CEOs. None of these irrelevant job titles. They met this criteria of the industry and keywords that we did. And they don't have a sales staff. They hired over the last year. And we excluded only the most relevant ones, which are the first results that Apollo gives us, the most relevant results. So we know that we want to reach out to these people. So if that's the case, then that's going to be a problem, because it's 35% of the list that's missing. So what we do is we don't stop there, because it's great. Apollo gives us a really good starting point, but there are other data enrichment sources that you can use to actually increase the number of leads that you are given by, checking somewhere outside of Apollo. In this case, what we did was we used Find Email to find the actual email account for the contacts where Apollo either didn't find an email or they found an email that was considered to be not safe to send to. So Find Email found a lot of those emails, most of the time actually. and just not here. There's some examples, of course, where Find Email wasn't able to find it. And there are other data enrichment sources where you can actually find them if Find Email or Apollo wasn't able to. Apollo found a good chunk of them. Apollo is a lot cheaper than Find Email, so it's a good starting point. But by just adding Find Email to the list, we were able to increase the leads list from 133 safe to send emails to 183, which means we added 50 more of this leads list of just 200 contacts. So that is an insane jump of how many contacts that we can reach out to that met all of these criteria for the types of companies that we want to reach out to. So that's really, really cool. And that's really the way that we make the most out of Apollo, is by making sure that we do it this way. So this was just a quick walkthrough of some of the best practices that we apply to Apollo to make sure that we get high quality leads lists. We look at the relevance here. We add some extra filters on here to make sure that we have very high quality leads. And then we use external data sources like Find Email to find the email accounts for people who Apollo wasn't able to find. So in this way, you're able to find email accounts for leads that maybe people who are 100% depending on just data sources like Apollo alone aren't reaching out to. So these are 50 people who Apollo wasn't able to find on this leads list of 200. And that's really nice because those 50 people are going to be contacted less often if everybody is using Apollo. But it's also just a good way of increasing the number of touch points that you have with the right type of prospect that you want to reach out to. Now, what I would do from here is I would actually just check with some AI integrations. We can, apply ChatGPT to the same clay table here just to check that, are these companies all B2B companies? Is the contact the right contact to reach out to? Because as we saw on here from the relevance filter, some of these contacts might actually, they all say CEO and co-founder because we only exported the first 200 out of the 16,000 possible leads, and these were all the most relevant ones. But if we were to export like a list of 5,000, we're going to start seeing some people who are not the most relevant people to reach out to. We can use AI to catch those and remove them from the campaign to decrease the number of people who ignore our emails. By decreasing the number of people who ignore our emails, we are also decreasing the likelihood that we go to spam. If we reach out accidentally because of just relying on Apollo's filters to, let's say, the CTO at the company, and we're talking to them about sales and marketing, they're probably going to mark us as spam. And that's just because we were actually spamming them. We were actually sending an irrelevant person an irrelevant message, and they should mark us as spam. So this is a really good way of ensuring that you don't do that. You can do that on here on Clay. Another thing that you can do outside of just checking if they're B2B to B or B2C is check if they're the right type of company that we want to reach out to for this offer. Are they actually a B2B SaaS company? Because if in the context of the copy that we are sending them, we're saying, hey, we help B2B SaaS companies just like your company, Wexa AI, but Wexa AI isn't a B2B SaaS company, then that's spam because it's irrelevant and they should mark us as spam, and that's going to decrease your deliverability. So all of this increases not only the receptiveness of the emails, not only does it increase the quality of the leads that you're reaching out to because they're the most relevant people to reach out to, but it also increases your deliverability. It increases the health of your inboxes so that you can continue to launch campaigns from these same inboxes without them burning and without you having to replace them very frequently. So this is all interconnected. The best way to get good results from cold email is to make sure that you have all of it in order. We can definitely help you with this if this is something that you want to do and you kind of like this is a little bit overwhelming. We actually have a new offer now where for basically bare bones, we will build your leads list for you. We will add AI enrichment so that you can have the personalization that email is supposed to have, which is to create one-to-one communication. And that's all going to be handled for you. It's going to be handed to you. We will also handle your infrastructure. We'll monitor your deliverability. As soon as your inboxes get burnt, we'll replace them with new ones immediately so you don't even notice. All of this is just kind of handled for you. It all starts at a one-time charge of $1,500 and $600 per month to have a leads list of 1,000 people with AI enrichments included and all of the deliverability handled for you. The sending tool is handed to you with an email campaign that's actually already in the tool that I write myself with your offer to increase the likelihood that you get results from the get-go. On top of that, we will be having weekly group calls so that you can join those calls and ask me questions directly so that we can move your campaigns along as quickly as possible. We'll be optimizing for getting responses, for getting calls booked, for getting people to show up to the calls, for making sure that they show up to the calls excited and informed for your offer. So there's all sorts of tactics that we use for our clients. You can actually be given these things too for bare bones price. If you want more information on that, we will be linking a document with all the information on that in the description here. But otherwise, I hope this video was helpful to you if you are building a prospecting list with Apollo, because these are the sorts of best practices that we apply to our campaigns for our clients and for ourselves.